Good day, everyone. Got my cup of coffee. As you can see behind me with the foliage, things are changing. It's starting to get a little colder outside. And these are the months when I start to ask myself how prepared I am for this time of year. Now, normally my preparedness is making sure the heater's working okay, making sure that I have rations for 72 hours, water, and I have alternative sources of heating. Buy things to seal up some windows. But this winter is a little different. And I'm going to start off by saying I do not know what is going to happen, but I think most people can say the situation that we are in as a nation, obviously in America, the situation we are in is not looking very good. Regardless of what side of the political spectrum you are, this has nothing to do with politics. This has everything to do with your health and well-being. And economically, it's not looking that great. And our available resources seem to be diminishing quickly. So I wanted to put together a quick video about what some of you should be thinking about from a high level perspective. And that is, how prepared are you for the worst case scenario or a bad scenario? Most people live their lives, hopefully, well enough where they do not have to worry about where their next meal is coming from or how much hardship that they should brace for. But a lot of times in life, no matter how good things are going, bad things can happen like that. And you really don't know when they might creep up on you. So my advice overall, the first note is to live your life and prepare like something bad will happen. And if nothing bad happens where you do not have to use those items that you prepared, then you consider that a win. But if something bad does happen, you have the ability to adjust, you have the resources you need, and that's also a win. But as I was thinking of my preparedness this year, I thought about the list that I usually put together, and one thought that came to mind was, how can you represent each level of preparedness? So my analogy is this. It's very simple. It's a map, a road map, if you will, where point A is where you're at right now, and point B is where you need to get to in order to be as prepared as you want to be. Now, everyone has their own level of necessities. Everybody feels like they need more or less. So it really depends on where you sit. What do you feel you need in order to be prepared? So, first of all, you have to set, at a high level, some buckets. I'll call them buckets of preparedness. Number one is what time of year we're going into. So it's obviously we're going into the winter. What do you need to be prepared for the winter in case something does occur? The first priority is always food and water. So assuring that you have food and water regardless of the time of year. And also make sure that the water that you're getting, you have enough not just to drink, because a lot of people, when they're getting water, I know it may sound obvious, but you need water more than just to drink, right? If you're growing any sort of herbs or vegetables or plants or what have you, you need you need water for those plants. You need water for bathing and washing your hands or wounds. And you need water for other sanitary purposes, like flushing your toilet. And you need water for washing things, washing the dishes, washing clothes. So you need a substantial amount of water in order to perform all of those tasks. So always have more water than you think you need. Then there's food. Obtaining food rations isn't too difficult these days. There's a lot of companies out there. I use 4 Patriots. That's the number 4 and then the word Patriots. They are a fantastic company. They provide all sorts of food rations and other products now they sell that are very helpful. So more water than you need, more food than you think you need, I should say. The other piece is, because we're going into winter, is heating. So you've got water and the food taken care of. Now you need to worry about heating. Some alternative sources of heating: propane, gas. You can purchase propane tanks anywhere from a certain amount of ounces to gallons. So there's plenty of heating devices that use propane, where you can burn indoors and outdoors, that burn safely. So looking into having just some sort of alternative source of heating, and categorize a designated heating zone in your house so that you know that's where the heat is going to be at all times, unless you have splurged and are able to heat every room in your house throughout the day and night. Heat proofing, again, is something that I mentioned earlier that I try to do, is finding ways for your house to retain the heat. That's not opening and closing the doors as much, or opening and closing the windows as much. Finding ways to seal off those spots where the heat may escape, and that's through slits under and around your doors and around your windows. Closing those off is very important to keeping your house warm. Having warm clothing is an obvious one. So it's heating, food and water, and safety. That last one could be taken any way you want. How can you remain safe? Because look, we've seen it happen before throughout history. We've seen it happen recently in America. When things get tough, you have people who are willing to help. You have people who are not willing to help but hoard. And you have people who are looking to steal, who may not have what they need, and are looking for those who may not be able to defend themselves. So I'm going to leave it at that. It's a sensitive subject. Not many people like to think about it. But from an overall perspective, not many people like to think about being prepared. It's an uncomfortable thought, and it hurts. It brings sadness to think that there are people out there who would do those things, but I would rather you be prepared than not. Thinking about important things is never comfortable. That's why they're important, because they're uncomfortable. So you have to think about those things regardless of how they make you feel. Okay, so how does this all tie into this roadmap? Set up your roadmap from where you're at right now to where you want to be. And each preparedness step that you need to fulfill is 1 mile. If you have no water, that's 1 mile. If you don't have enough food, that's another mile. If you don't have alternative heating sources, that's another mile. If you don't have a way to seal off the locations in your house where heat may escape and cold air may enter, that's another mile. If you don't have enough warm clothes, that's another mile. If you have not designated a heating zone in your house, that's another mile. Continue to add miles onto your journey and see how far away you are from your destination. Now, once you have established your route, you need to know what you are going to do at your destination. That's the next step. You've arrived at your destination, now what? You need to then plan, based off of the resources you have, and understand how long you are able to survive off of those resources, such as your food and water. Now that you've calculated that, you have a successful roadmap, you have a plan in place for when you have the resources, and you should really at this point be able to settle down and know that you will be able to make it through the winter. You think about this, and this is what people have thought about for thousands of years. All throughout the spring, summer, and early fall months, you're prepping for the winter. You're gathering food, you're building shelter, and you're developing land in order to fulfill your next year's supplies for the next winter. You're always thinking ahead. We have gotten so far away from that, which is partly a good thing. I think it's great that most people don't have to think about where they're getting their next meal or how prepared are they for winter. You can go to the grocery store and you have those options available to you. You have fresh vegetables in the middle of winter. Those things have never been available to civilizations until very recently. So, what happens if all of those amenities and privileges disappear? And not saying overnight, but what we've been seeing lately is a trend in the wrong direction. That's why I'm more concerned about this winter than other winters, because you're seeing a trend in the wrong direction. Supply chain issues and overall shortages on everything. Keep in touch with what's happening in terms of the supply chain, the economy, and also keep an eye on fuel. Those are some of the most important things because fuel drives almost everything. I know a couple people who are in the trucking industry, and they're saying it's never, ever, ever cost this much to fill their tanks for their trucks. And what happens when the fuel prices go up for the truckers? Well, the companies who own those trucks, who have to pay to fill those tanks, are going to charge more for delivery. What happens when they're charging more for delivery? The grocery stores are going to have to pay more, and other stores are going to have to pay more money to obtain those products via shipping, whether it's through overseas shipping, air travel, air delivery, trucks, trains. Either way, the fuel is costing more, and it baselines everything. So now you have more expensive products because these stores have to pay more for the fuel. Everything is interrelated. If this continues, nothing good will come of it. I think we can all get to that conclusion. But again, I'm not going to sit here and tell you exactly what's going to happen. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that everything's going to be fine. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that everything is not going to be okay and we're going to be running into hardship and famine. But either way, be prepared. Establish your roadmap from where you're at right now to where you need to be, short-term and long-term goals, and get yourself there. Stop putting this thought in the back of your mind, telling yourself it's going to be okay. You're not going to do well if something goes wrong, because if you continue to live your life like everything is going to be fine, how will you be prepared if it's not? And here's another thought. If you think that a situation arises, that when a situation arises where, let's say, it hits the fan, it could be any situation, a natural disaster, start off with that. What happens if there is a massive natural disaster and the first responders either can't get to you, or they're taking care of themselves and their families? How are you going to get by? Because in reality, those first responders, and I've talked to many of them, A lot of them have told me that if something goes terribly wrong, and if it hits the fan, they're not coming for you. They're going to help their own families and their friends, not you. You are not first on their priority list. And regardless of how much they get paid, just because you pay someone to help you doesn't mean they're going to. So how do you do this? You can't do this on your own, right? Establish a community around you with your neighbors. You don't have to sit down with them and talk about it, a specific plan, but just become friendly enough with them so that they're on your mind and you're on their mind. Because those closest to you could be your most important resource for surviving. Because if you don't know your neighbors and it turns out they're the type that like to steal, now you're in trouble. Or they're the type that likes to help and they're not helping you because they don't know you, now you're in trouble. Establish a community. These are all things to think about. And you don't have to think about it all at once. You don't have to overwhelm yourself with all these thoughts. And again, I'm not sitting here and saying for certain that something horrible is going to happen. And I'm not sitting here saying that for certain nothing bad will happen. You have to understand that this is life. Bad things are always going to happen, and they're usually going to happen because you didn't plan for it. And that's just life. So live with the hopes that nothing bad will happen, but prepare for the situation when something bad does happen. And again, food, water, heating, and safety. Use those 3 buckets to try to be as prepared as you can for this winter, or any winter at that. Lastly, I just want to say one more thing. When it comes to preparing, you also need to be familiar with history. Now you may be asking yourself, what's the correlation there? Knowing what has happened throughout history and understanding the patterns will make you realize that nothing is out of the question. Just because you live in the nation that you live in doesn't mean that those bad things will not happen there. Understand that we cannot allow ourselves to become dependent solely on one system. Because how quickly that system can be turned against you. And that is my other warning. That may seem a little bit more extreme, but I'm willing to say it, and I have no problem with saying it. And you may call me a crazed conspiracy theorist, tinfoil hat nut job, but that's the truth. Because when you understand history and you see the patterns of human behavior, that any time a civilization becomes dependent on one source, and that source happens to be authoritative, politically speaking, nothing good comes of it. Get out of that system. Be your own leader. Start a community. Gather up your resources for survival and for preparedness, and have it there just in case you need it. Think about it this way. You build a shelter, you build a foundation, and you build the structure. You have it in your backyard if you need it. And you go throughout your life And you never, ever have to step 1 foot into that shelter. We all hope and pray that that will be the situation. But what if you need it? Well, guess what? It's right there for you. And another reason for understanding history, because it will also help you with your roadmap, and it will make you realize now more than ever you need to get out of your dependency on the system, because it's not always going to be there. And when you realize that, you will not be led somewhere undesirable by those in authority who control that system. Because you will know if you're going the right way or not, and no one else will. This is another reason why it's important to have a roadmap for preparedness and for your understanding of what could potentially happen in the future. Because if you don't, and things go awry, and no one else around you has a roadmap, who's going to be able to help you, and who's going to be willing to help you? And not everyone with that roadmap will be willing to help you if you don't have one. Get one together. I mean this. Truly, please. I don't care if it's just something very simple. Buying dry rice and dried beans, buying a couple bottles of water, buying peanut butter and jelly, pasta, things of that sort. Buy things that have a long shelf life. That's it. And you'll be more prepared now than you were yesterday. Buy just one little propane heater with a couple of little bottles and just put it in your closet. You don't need a massive storage unit. You don't need an underground trailer like these doomsday preppers. You don't need all that. Well, at least we don't think we need that. But start small and then build your way up. It's exactly what I have been doing. And it helps. Just maybe a strategy could be every time you get paid, just buy a little something. Instead of buying a new shirt that you're going to wear 2 times and you're never going to wear it again. Go out and buy some water. Go out and buy some fuel stabilizer. Go out and buy some jerry cans. Go out and buy alternative heating device. Slowly but surely, you'll build up your foundation for preparedness. And if something goes wrong, if your power goes out for 2 days because no one can get the power back on because there's a massive storm, an ice storm or a snowstorm or a hurricane, you're prepared. Anyway, it was a long rant. That's all I got. Stay vigilant. And good luck.